Last time we checked in with Michael Jordan, he was dunking all over Tulsa. Though he was still only a freshman, Jordan showed clear signs of the dominant player he would later become. After only 3 games with North Carolina, Michael Jordan had become a superstar. And North Carolina was playing amazing basketball. I mean, they were clearly the #1 team in the country. 2 days after that Tulsa game, the Tar Heels hosted Yugoslavia's national team. For an exhibition game, this one was really close. Jordan led the way with 23 points. Now, this was the same Yugoslavia team that had won the gold medal in basketball at the 1980 Olympics, which is the one the United States boycotted. The same Yugoslavia team had also finished a close second to the Soviet Union in the 1981 Eurobasket tournament. Unfortunately, no video of the Yugoslavia-North Carolina game exists, but it gives you an idea of the level at which the Tar Heels were playing. A week later, North Carolina had another regular season game, this time against South Florida, another team that was undefeated. The Tar Heels won that game really easily, and Jordan scored 16 points, leading the team once again. Well, like I said, this is really impressive for a freshman. I mean, Michael Jordan wasn't just a good player or a starter even, he was the best player on the team. Even Coach Dean Smith was impressed with how his team was playing. Next up was the late night game against Rutgers at Madison Square Garden, the second game of a doubleheader at the Garden. Only about 11,000 fans showed up, which is a little bit over half the capacity of Madison Square Garden. Now, part of the reason for this was almost certainly the lack of advertising. I could not find a single advertisement or article about this doubleheader in any of the 1981 New York newspapers I looked at. This was going to be a huge test for Rutgers. It wasn't necessarily going to be a walk in the park for North Carolina, though. Rutgers had already beaten UCLA, who were ranked second at the time, and Rutgers had also come close to upsetting North Carolina back in 1980. The Rutgers win over UCLA was a low-scoring defensive affair. Rutgers at that time employed a really strong zone defense that was hard for even the most talented teams to break down. This is one of those details that we tend to forget about when we talk about the greatest players of all time. This is the third 1981 North Carolina game that we've looked at so far, and it is the third time that the Tar Heels faced a really difficult zone defense. I mean, the game really wasn't that wide open back in those days. The first surprise of this game is that Michael Jordan didn't start. Instead, it was senior Chris Brust starting at small forward. Brust was from New York State. My guess is that Dean Smith wanted to make sure he had a few minutes of game time. In fact, there were a number of UNC players from New York. Sam Perkins, Jimmy Black, and Matt Doherty all came from the city. Clarence Tillman, who later played in the CBA for a few years, was one of Rutgers' stars. Rutgers also had Roy Hinson, who played for years in the NBA. And Rutgers also had John Battle, another player who later played in the NBA. In other words, these guys weren't exactly pushovers, and you can tell that from the start. North Carolina had a really hard time trying to crack the zone defense, especially since they didn't have a good outside shooter on the floor. After only a few minutes of this, Jordan came in. But Rutgers got out to an early 4-2 lead. Now, North Carolina was able to get a few spectacular plays now and then. And here's a really good pass by Michael Jordan. Jordan needed to hit outside jumpers like this to break the zone down. He missed here, but you can tell what that offensive strategy was. Now, Jordan made a great move here, but Sam Perkins couldn't hold on. However, Perkins was able to make up for it with a block on the other end. Rutgers went out to an early 13-10 lead. This was a defensive struggle. Now, if you look closely, you'll see that Jordan was able to get open on the baseline, but nobody looked to feed him. Okay, far be it from me to criticize Dean Smith's offense, and I'm certainly no basketball expert, but I really have to question why Smith took these outstanding fast players and tried to force them to play a sterile half-court offensive game where you feed the ball into Worthy. These games can be really hard to watch at times because there's all this passing around the perimeter in hopes of somehow getting Worthy open inside the zone. The Tar Heels eventually discovered that the zone left the baseline open. And here's Sam Perkins down there again. However, things got ugly before the end of the first half. The score was 24-19 going into the second half, a really low-scoring game even in the age before the shot clock. And that's when Michael Jordan decided to take over. Well, like I said, if you've got a guy who can run and dunk like that, what are you doing having him stand like way above the foul line trying to pass the ball inside? North Carolina was a little bit too unselfish from time to time, and Jordan really didn't have a great shooting day. But Michael made up for it in other ways.
Michael Jordan almost lost it. Doherty finally puts it up and in.
These shots aren't easy to make. Rutgers certainly didn't make it easy for North Carolina. However, when you've got a guy who can take on a triple team and score like this, you don't have much to worry about. It was a little bit ugly, but it was effective. And you know, sometimes it was really pretty.
Long by Jordan, wrap around dribble, and it goes to Black to Doherty.
Now this is the part where it became obvious that North Carolina was going to win. It's a thing of beauty, even all of these years later. Michael Jordan had an uncanny ability to get himself open like this.
Ball deflected, but picked off by Jordan, left open.
He was also a great rebounder.
He hit 2 bombs in the first half, this one a little bit long.
Check out this double clutch.
Dean Smith yelling at him to protect the ball. There's Jordan again. He double clutches it up and in.
In the end, North Carolina prevailed, winning by a 59-36 margin. North Carolina had been helped by a 6-minute scoreless spell by Rutgers in the second half. Otherwise, this game would have been a lot closer. And once again, Jordan led the way with 15 points in 31 minutes. And so the Tar Heels continued to roll. Jordan was clearly a star even in his freshman year in college. He truly was one of a kind.